to have a look at responding to a past question 11 on dispossession. It includes a quote, "The land is my mother. Like a human mother, the land gives us protection, enjoyment, and provides our needs, economic, social, and religious. When the land is taken from us, we feel hurt because we belong to the land and we are part of it." And that is from Dejini Gondara. So the question is, how has dispossession had a negative impact on Aboriginal spiritualities? So the first thing that we ask is, which dot point is this question referring to? And the answer is the dot point to discuss the continuing effects of dispossession on Aboriginal spiritualities in relation to the separation from land, separation from kinship groups, and the stolen generations. So how will you answer this question? Firstly, we need to look at the key words from the question. Dispossession, what is it? Dispossession refers to the forced removal of Aboriginal people from their traditional lands. It's better to make your definition specific to this topic area rather than a generalized definition of dispossession whereby something is removed or taken away from somebody. Spirituality is referring to Aboriginal dreaming or Aboriginal spiritualities. Negative impact. What has the removal of Aboriginal peoples from their traditional lands by the process of dispossession done to impede the expression of the dreaming for Aboriginal peoples? The second thing that you need to do is know your HSC instructional verbs. With this word how, it implies that an explanation, that is cause and effect, is required to answer this question. Thirdly, you need to reference the quote, preferably by paraphrasing sections of it into the line of your discussion. Often what students do is they dump whole chunks of the quote without making reference to it in the rest of their response. Also, make sure that you use quotation marks so that the reader knows that you are indeed referencing the quote. You won't get full marks if you don't reference the quote, if there is one in the question. Fourth, use your syllabus dot points to organize your response and utilize subject-specific language. For example, the reference to stolen generations within this dot point. What are the stolen generations? The stolen generations are the removal of Aboriginal people to missions and reserves where traditional Aboriginal practices and languages were prohibited. So once Aboriginal people were moved to missions by Christian authorities and reserves by government authorities, they were prohibited from practicing their Aboriginal spirituality or dreaming, as well as speaking Aboriginal languages. The stolen generations occurred as a result of government policies of segregation or protectionism from the mid-1880s and assimilation from 1961. Once you've identified the stolen generations, what they are, and briefly identified the process of dispossession, you now really need to answer the how of the question. So in this way, we can use our dot point to organize our response by providing detailed examples of how separation from the land impeded or negatively impacted on the expression of the dreaming. So the loss of access to the land or separation from the land resulted in a loss of access to sacred sites, so that rituals and ceremonies such as initiation, funeral, birthing, and corroborees could not be performed to bring the ancestral beings from the dreaming to life in the here and now. That metatemporal concept of continuous past, present, and future all rolled up into the eternal present. Also, the spirit of the deceased individuals can no longer return to their totemic identities. So after death, the deceased individual, their spirit, returns to their ancestral beings who dwell within the land as part of that, their totem, whether it's flora or fauna, kangaroo, waratah, whatever their totem is. Aboriginal peoples lose their sense of identity as they cannot connect with their totemic identity, flora, or fauna. The animals could be a koala, goanna, kangaroo. We know that Aboriginal tribes cannot kill their own totemic identity because that means that they are actually killing their ancestors. The fact that their totem resides in their country and perhaps not in another country or not another area of Australia means that they cannot return to that totemic identity after death, and also they can't connect with that totemic identity during their life. Aboriginal peoples lose their sense of purpose because they can no longer perform their particular roles and responsibilities, for example, the men as hunters and the women as gatherers. Secondly, we can use examples that relate to the separation from kinship groups. And again, this is the how. Kinship refers to the complex network of relationships governing how Aboriginal members of language groups interact with one another. A loss of kinship means a loss of social structures, including rules governing who can marry who, based on an individual's skin name, as well as other structures that determine social relationships. All of that is gone with the loss of connection to kinship. Loss of specific roles and responsibilities an individual is to carry out. For example, in relation to initiation ceremonies, where female elders initiate girls into the secret sacred knowledge of adult responsibility, and likewise with men and boys. Also, elders cannot pass on this secret sacred knowledge to the next generation, as children have been removed as a result of the stolen generations. So you can see that this has a devastating impact on Aboriginal spiritualities. And finally, how are you going to structure this information? Well, it fits very nicely into the ideal paragraph structure, where with your intro sentence you could mention that inextricable link between Aboriginal spirituality and the land, and how dispossession has had a devastating or detrimental effect on this link. Then you could talk about dispossession, what it is and how it was achieved through the stolen generation, through those policies of protectionism and assimilation. And here is where, in your example and your analysis or your explanation, you can talk about the impact of dispossession on separation from land and the separation from kinship groups, using those examples to show that negative impact of dispossession on the dreaming, because really the dreaming, and it should have a capital D, is about all aspects of their life, because the dreaming infiltrated every aspect of an Aboriginal person's life. And then re-emphasis on the negative impact of dispossession on Aboriginal spirituality in your linking statement. So now you could give that question a go.